The trail markers were all facing the wrong direction when we found them, and that's when I knew something wasn't just off, it was deliberate. We'd started that morning at a standard access point off County Road 18. Nothing unusual, just three of us planning a 2-night hike through a part of the forest that barely saw traffic this time of year. I was the one with the most experience, former seasonal ranger, so I handled the map and radio. Mark had brought a handheld GPS he barely knew how to use, and Jason was just there for the escape, said he needed quiet after a rough month. The weather was clear when we set out, but there'd been a cold front the night before, and the ground still held moisture, which made footprints easy to spot, something I didn't think about at first, but it mattered later. About 2 miles in, we hit the first odd thing. A wooden trail marker had been twisted around on its post, pointing back the way we came. It wasn't broken, just rotated. I fixed it without thinking much of it. Vandalism happens, people get bored. But then we found another one like it about 10 minutes later, then another. That's when Mark joked someone didn't want us going deeper, and Jason laughed, but I didn't. I radioed a quick check on the local frequency, mostly out of habit. Static came back, with a faint click at the end, like someone keying in but not speaking. I tried again. Same result. We kept moving. Around noon, we reached a small clearing that wasn't marked on the map. There was an old fire ring there, still intact, and inside it were ashes that looked fresh, gray, not yet scattered by wind. Next to it sat a crushed aluminum can, the kind you only find in regional stores about 50 miles north. That was detail number 1 that stuck with me. This wasn't just some random hiker passing through. Someone had been here recently, and they weren't local to this exact area. Jason suggested we take a break there, but I said no. I didn't like unmarked clearings with fresh signs of use. We pushed on. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. Not just less birds, completely still. Even our footsteps sounded muted, like the ground was swallowing noise. About an hour later, Mark's GPS started acting up. The screen flickered, then froze, then reset itself to a date from 2 years ago. He swore under his breath and tapped it a few times, but it kept glitching. I told him to shut it off and rely on the map. Technology fails out here more often than people admit. We were aiming for a ridge that overlooked a narrow valley, a good spot to camp, but we never reached it. Instead, we found a trail that wasn't on the map. It cut across our path at a sharp angle, narrow but clearly used. The ground was packed down, and there were footprints, deep ones, like someone carrying weight. They all went in one direction. Downhill. I crouched to look closer. The prints weren't uniform. Different shoe sizes, maybe 2 or 3 people. But overlaid on top of them were drag marks, like something heavy had been pulled along the trail. Jason asked if it could be a deer. I shook my head. Too straight, too consistent. We stood there longer than we should have, just staring at it. Then Mark pointed out something I hadn't noticed yet. The trees along that trail had small strips of orange tape tied around them, but not the kind used by park services. These were thinner, almost like construction ribbon, and they were placed at regular intervals. Not guiding, not marking a boundary, just there. We decided to follow it for a bit, just to see where it led. I know that sounds like the most weren't left open, and they are always terrible. They were deeply discussed. Clothes, a half-empty water bottle, and a folded map that didn't match the area. The map was for a different section of the forest entirely, about 30 miles east. That was detail number 2. Whoever owned this bag either got very lost or was brought here from somewhere else. Jason wanted to turn back then. Mark agreed. I hesitated, then nodded. Something about that place felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain, and I've learned not to ignore that feeling. We turned around and started heading back up the slope, but after about 10 minutes, the trail behind us didn't look the same. The orange ribbons were gone. Not all of them, just enough that the path looked less defined. I stopped and scanned the trees. The ribbons we had passed earlier were simply not there anymore. I know how that sounds, but I'm telling you, they were gone. Mark said maybe we took a slightly different route, but the incline felt identical. The terrain matched. Still, the markers were missing. I pulled out my radio again and tried another check. This time, a voice came through, faint and distorted. It said, "You're off trail. Head north." Then it cut out. The problem was, I hadn't given our location, and we weren't officially in a monitored zone. That frequency wasn't supposed to have active traffic out here. I asked if either of them heard it. They both nodded. Jason looked pale. We started moving faster, trying to regain the main trail. The light was starting to shift, that late afternoon dimming that comes earlier in dense forest. After another 15 minutes, we reached what looked like the original path we had been on, but something was off. The trail markers were still twisted, but now they were all facing inward, toward the trees, not along the path. It was subtle, but it meant someone had been there again, recently. Mark said I didn't respond. I was listening to it. I didn't respond. I was listening. There was a sound off to our right, deeper in the trees. More like footsteps, slow and deliberate, matching our pace. We stopped. The sound stopped. We moved again. It followed. Jason whispered that we should call out, but I shook my head. You don't call out unless you're sure who's out there. We kept walking, faster now. The trail began to narrow, branches closing in, and the ground got uneven. At one point, I noticed a small metal stake driven into the soil, barely visible under leaves. It had a strip of that same orange ribbon tied to it, but this one had something written on it, in black marker. Just a number, 17. That was detail number 3. I didn't know what it meant, but it felt like part of a system, not random. We passed 2 more stakes like that, numbered 18 and 19, spaced about 20 feet apart. Then, the trail ended. Just stopped. No clearing, no turn, just dense brush and trees. Behind us, the path we came from looked thinner than before, almost like it was closing in. That's when the radio crackled again. Same voice, clearer this time. You missed the turn. Go back to marker 12. I felt my stomach drop. We hadn't seen any marker 12. Mark grabbed my arm and asked who that was. I didn't have an answer. We turned around and started back, but the stakes were gone. All of them. The ground where they had been was undisturbed, like nothing had ever been there. Jason started panicking, breathing too fast, saying we were being led somewhere. I told him to calm down, but I was thinking the same thing. We pushed through the brush, trying to find any familiar landmark. The light was fading fast now, and the temperature was dropping. At one point, we broke into another clearing, larger than the first. In the center was a structure, just a frame really, made of wood and tarps. It looked like a temporary shelter, but it was empty. No gear, no supplies, just the frame. Hanging from one of the beams was a radio, the same model I was carrying. It was on. The speaker hissed with static, then the voice came through again, louder now. You're not supposed to be here. We all froze. I stepped closer to the radio, reached out to turn it off, but before I could touch it, it clicked and went silent. Behind us there was a snap, like a branch breaking under weight. We turned, but there was nothing there. Just trees. Too many trees. We didn't stay. We ran. Not blindly, but fast enough that we stopped caring about the trail. We just moved uphill, aiming for higher ground, hoping to regain orientation. After what felt like an hour, we hit a gravel service road. It wasn't on our map, but it was real, and it led somewhere. We followed it until we found a gate, locked but not secured properly. We climbed over and kept going until we reached our car. It was still there, no signs of tampering, no other vehicles around. We drove out in silence. Later, when I checked the map again, that service road wasn't marked anywhere. I reported everything the next day to the local ranger station, gave them coordinates as best as I could estimate. They said they'd look into it. A week later, I got a call back. They told me there was no record of any unauthorized structures or trails in that area, no reports of missing hikers matching the backpack we found, and no one had been using that radio frequency. I asked about the trail markers being turned. They said maintenance hadn't been out there in months. Before hanging up, the ranger asked me one more question. He said, "Did you happen to see any numbered stakes?" I hesitated, then said yes. There was a pause on the line, longer than it should have been. Then he said, "If you go back out there, don't follow those. We haven't gone back. None of us have. But sometimes I think about that first marker we fixed, the one pointing the wrong way, because if we hadn't turned it, would we ever found that trail at all? The radio logged a distress call from a ranger who didn't exist, and it came from a sector that had been closed for over a decade. I was on night rotation at a small backcountry station, the kind that only sees traffic during hunting season or emergencies, and even then it's rare. My job was mostly routine, hourly radio checks, logging weather changes, and monitoring a couple of outdated surveillance feeds that covered trailheads miles apart. It was just past 11:40 p.m. when the call came in. The voice was calm, controlled, but off in a way I couldn't place. He identified himself as Ranger Cole, badge number 4721, and said he needed immediate backup near Sector D14. That designation stopped me cold. D14 had been restricted since a wildfire back in 2012. The trails were officially erased from maps, and access was blocked by old fencing and signage. I pulled up the personnel registry while keeping the channel open. No Ranger Cole. No badge number 4721. I asked him to repeat his location. He did. Exactly the same, like he was reading it off something. Then he added, "They're not staying where they should." I asked who he meant. No response. Just a soft clicking sound, like someone tapping the radio casing. Then silence. I logged the call, marked it as suspicious, and tried to raise dispatch. Nothing but static. That wasn't unusual at night, but the timing didn't sit right. I switched to a secondary frequency. Still nothing. That's when I noticed the surveillance feed from Trailhead 3 flicker. It was a grainy black and white camera mounted on a rusted pole, facing a dirt lot that hadn't been maintained in years. At first I thought it was just interference. Then the image stabilized, and I saw a vehicle parked there. A white SUV. Engine off. No lights. It hadn't been there during my last check. I zoomed in as much as the system allowed. The license plate was partially visible, but the angle was wrong to read it clearly. What bothered me more was the driver's side door. It was open. Just slightly, like someone had stepped out and never closed it. I grabbed my jacket and keys. Protocol said to wait for backup, but there was no one else on shift within 30 miles. I left a note in the logbook and headed out. The drive to Trailhead 3 took about 20 minutes on a narrow service road that twisted through dense forest. My headlights barely cut through the trees, and the further I went, the more the radio picked up faint bursts of static, like distant chatter just out of range. About halfway there, I passed the old boundary sign for Sector D14. It was faded, half knocked over, but still readable. Restricted area. No entry. Someone had spray painted over it recently, but not to cover it, just a single arrow pointing inward. I slowed down, considered turning around, but kept going. When I reached the trailhead, the SUV was exactly where I saw it on the feed. White, mid-size, older model, no visible damage. The engine was cold. I checked the interior with my flashlight. Empty. No keys in the ignition. No personal items on the seats. But in the back, there was a folded blanket and a plastic container filled with what looked like trail markers. Bright orange ones, still bundled. I stepped back and scanned the area. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. No wind, no insects, nothing. Just that same heavy stillness I'd felt before on bad nights. I radioed in again, hoping for any response. Instead, I got that same voice. "You made it." I turned in a full circle, trying to locate the source. "Where are you?" I asked. "Close," he said. They moved again. I asked who he was talking about. He didn't answer directly, just said, "Follow the markers. They'll take you there." I looked down at the container in the SUV. The markers, still bundled, untouched. "There are no markers," I said. A pause. Then, "There should be." The radio cut out again. I stood there for a moment, trying to decide what to do. Then I noticed something on the ground near the trail entrance. A single orange marker, already placed, pointing into the trees. It hadn't been there a second ago. I'm sure of that. I hadn't taken my eyes off that spot for more than a moment. I picked it up. It was clean, unused, like the ones in the container. I looked back at the SUV. Still empty. Door still open. I don't know why I did it, but I followed the marker. The trail it pointed to wasn't official. It was narrow, overgrown, and sloped downward into thicker forest. Every few yards, there was another marker, all identical.
All freshly placed. After about 10 minutes, I started noticing something else. Footprints. Multiple sets, overlapping, heading in the same direction. Some were deep, like someone carrying weight. Others were lighter, uneven. One set looked like it was dragging slightly, the heel never fully lifting. I kept going. The radio stayed silent, but I could feel it in my hand, like it was waiting. Eventually, the trail opened into a small clearing. In the center, there was a structure. Not permanent, just wooden beams and tarps, similar to a temporary shelter. But this one had equipment inside. Radios, batteries, a folding table with maps spread out. All of them marked with the same sector designation, D-14. I stepped closer, scanning the area. No one there, no movement, just the hum of a generator off to the side. I checked one of the radios. It was tuned to the same frequency I'd been using. The screen showed a call log, multiple entries, all from Ranger Cole, all time-stamped over the past 3 days. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate. I turned. No one, but the sound didn't stop. It circled the clearing, just beyond the tree line. I grabbed my flashlight and swept it across the edge. For a second, I thought I saw something, movement between the trees, but it was gone before I could focus on it. The radio on the table crackled. "You're early," the voice said. I stepped back. "Where are you?"
I asked again. "Watching," he replied, "making sure they stay where they belong." "Who?" I said. No answer. Instead, one of the maps on the table shifted slightly, like something had brushed against it. I moved closer. The map was marked with circles, each one numbered, 1 through 23. And next to each circle was a note. Some said stable, others said moved. A few were crossed out entirely. I didn't understand what I was looking at, but I knew I shouldn't be there. I turned to leave. That's when I noticed the markers again. Not on the ground this time, but hanging from the trees around the clearing. Dozens of them, all facing inward, like they were pointing at the structure, like they were marking it. The footsteps stopped. The forest went completely silent. Then the voice came through one last time, not from the radio, from somewhere in the trees. "You weren't supposed to find this one." I didn't wait. I ran. I didn't follow the markers this time. I just pushed through the brush, uphill, away from the clearing. Branches scraped my arms, roots caught my boots, but I didn't stop. After what felt like forever, I broke back onto the main trail. The markers were gone. All of them, like they'd never been there. I made it back to the SUV. Still empty, still open. I got in my truck and drove straight back to the station. I filed a full report, included everything: coordinates, descriptions, the voice, the structure. They sent a team out the next morning. I went with them. We found the trailhead. The SUV was gone. No tire tracks, no sign it had ever been there. We searched the area for hours. No trail, no markers, no clearing, nothing. Just dense forest and old burn scars from the fire years ago. They told me it was probably a prank, someone messing with old frequencies, setting up temporary camps. But that doesn't explain the call logs, or the maps, or the fact that I still have one of those markers. I didn't realize it until I got home. It was in my jacket pocket, clean, unused. And on the back, written in black marker, was a number I hadn't seen before. 24. The emergency beacon was still transmitting when we found the tent, but there was no one inside and no sign anyone had left. I was part of a volunteer search and rescue team called in just after sunrise, responding to a locator signal that had been pinging overnight from a restricted stretch of forest near an old research boundary. The area wasn't officially closed, but it wasn't on any public trail maps either. The call came in as a possible missing hiker, single subject, last seen 2 days earlier at a gas station about 40 miles out. His car had been found parked illegally near a service gate that should have been locked. It wasn't. That detail mattered more later. There were 4 of us on the initial team, plus a coordinator back at base handling radio traffic. I was assigned navigation and comms, so I carried the primary radio and logged our movement every 15 minutes. The terrain was uneven, dense with low brush and scattered rock shelves that made footing tricky. It had rained lightly the night before, just enough to soften the ground without washing anything away. That's usually ideal for tracking. But what we found didn't behave like normal tracks. About half a mile in, we picked up a clear set of footprints heading deeper into the restricted zone. Standard hiking boots, medium tread, nothing unusual. But every 20 or 30 feet, the prints would just stop, not fade, stop. Then, a few yards ahead, they'd start again, perfectly aligned, same direction, same stride. One of the guys, Ravi, said maybe the subject was stepping on rocks or logs to avoid mud. That made sense in theory, but there were no rocks where the prints disappeared. Just soft soil. I marked the pattern in my log, and we kept following. The signal from the beacon was steady, getting stronger as we moved in. Around 9:20 a.m., we reached a narrow clearing where the tent was set up. It was a lightweight solo tent, properly staked, rainfly secured. No signs of damage. Inside, there was a sleeping bag, a backpack, and a small stove. Everything neatly arranged, like the person had just stepped out for a moment. The emergency beacon was clipped to a loop inside the tent, still active. That didn't make sense. You don't leave your beacon behind if you're moving, especially in unfamiliar terrain. I checked the battery level, still over 80%. It hadn't been on long, maybe 6 hours max. But the missing hiker had been gone for 2 days. That timeline didn't add up. We split up to search the immediate area, keeping visual contact. I circled the perimeter of the clearing, looking for any sign of departure. There were footprints leading into the clearing, but none leading out. None, not even partials. The ground was soft enough to hold impressions, and we were careful not to disturb anything. It was like the person had walked into the tent and then vanished. I radioed the coordinator, gave our position, and reported the situation. Static came back, that a faint response, but it wasn't from base. "Don't mark it yet," a voice said. "You'll confuse the count." I froze. "Repeat that," I said. No reply. Just a low hum, then silence. I asked the others if they heard it. 2 of them nodded. The 4th, Anil, said his radio hadn't picked up anything. We regrouped near the tent. Ravi suggested maybe another team was already in the area, using a different frequency. But we were the only unit assigned to this sector. I checked the beacon again, still transmitting, still inside the tent. Then I noticed something on the ground just outside the entrance. A small metal tag, half buried in the dirt. I brushed it off. It had a number stamped into it, 06. No other markings. I asked if anyone had seen it before. No one had. I put it in my pocket, and we expanded the search radius. About 10 minutes later, Anil called out. He'd found another set of prints, different from the first. These were lighter, smaller, maybe a different person. They circled the clearing once, then led off into the trees. We followed them. The pattern was the same, clear impressions, then sudden gaps, then reappearing ahead. It didn't feel like someone trying to hide their trail. It felt inconsistent, like the person didn't move the same way the whole time. As we went deeper, the forest got quieter. Not just less noise, no. Noise. No birds, no wind, nothing. Even our gear sounded muted. That kind of silence isn't normal, even in remote areas. It usually means something's wrong. We reached another clearing, smaller this time, and found a second tent. Same model. Same setup, empty. Inside, there was another beacon, also active. I checked it, battery at 90%, recently turned on. That meant 2 separate beacons, both activated within hours, both left behind. Ravi looked at me and said, "This isn't one hiker." I didn't respond, but I was thinking the same thing. We checked the ground. Footprints again, but more of them now. Overlapping, circling, some leading into the tent, none leading out. And near the edge of the clearing, another metal tag. This one read 07. I didn't like that. Not at all. I radioed base again. This time the response came through clearly. They confirmed no other teams were in the area, no additional missing persons reported. I started to explain what we were seeing, but the signal cut out mid-sentence. Then that same voice came back. "You're adding to it," it said. "Stop moving." My chest tightened. "Who is this?" I asked. "How many of you are there?" No answer. Just that low hum again. I turned to the others. They'd heard it too. Anno was visibly shaken now, pacing slightly, scanning the trees like he expected someone to step out. We decided to head back to the first tent and reassess. But when we retraced our steps, the path didn't line up. The markers we'd mentally noted, fallen branches, rock formations, weren't where they should be. It was like the terrain had shifted, just enough to throw off our sense of direction. That happens more often than people think, especially in dense forest. But this felt different. Too precise, too consistent. After about 15 minutes of trying to backtrack, we broke into a third clearing. This one had no tent, just a circle of disturbed ground, like something had been there and removed. In the center was a cluster of those metal tags. I counted them. 11. All numbered, sequentially, up to 11. I checked my pocket. The one I'd found earlier, 06, was gone. I hadn't taken it out. I hadn't dropped it. It was just not there anymore. Ravi said we should leave. Now. No argument from anyone. We picked a direction and moved, fast but controlled, trying to regain higher ground. The forest stayed silent. The radio stayed quiet. After what felt like an hour, we finally picked up a faint signal from base again. They guided us out using compass bearings. When we reached the service gate, it was closed, locked this time. We had to climb over. Our vehicles were still there, untouched. We debriefed immediately, gave full reports, coordinates, descriptions, everything. They sent a second team out the next day. Larger group, better equipment. They found nothing. No tents, no beacons, no clearings, just forest. The official explanation was equipment malfunction and disorientation due to terrain. They logged it as an inconclusive search. But here's the part that still doesn't sit right with me. When I reviewed my body cam footage later, the first clearing, the one with the tent and the beacon, was there. Clear as day, but the timescape didn't match our log. It was off by exactly 1 hour and 17 minutes. And during that missing time, the footage showed something we never saw while we were there. The tent door moved, not from wind. It opened, slowly, just a few inches, then stopped. And inside, where the beacon had been clipped, there was nothing. Just an empty loop, swaying slightly, like something had just been taken off it.